Anyway, I went and interviewed at this large firm in Houston for the third or fourth time over the years, and I'd always interview, they'd make me an offer, I'd turn it down, I'd do something else. And so I went and I drove for this interview, and I'm probably embellishing a little bit, but it's how I like to remember it. Went to this interview, and they said, Michael, it's so nice to see you again. We're not going to offer you a job today. We just really wanted to see you and see how you were and talk with you a little bit. And they looked at me and they said, Michael, if you could do anything in the world right now, what would you do? And I said, well, I would probably be a road manager for the band Radiohead. That's what I would do, because I would love to go listen to music every day and travel the world. And they said, no, for real. Cut the act, Mike. What would you do? And I said, I would design and develop my own projects. And they said, why? And I said, so I could be in control and limit the mistakes of others.
We would like to thank our title sponsor, B1 Bank. B1 Bank knows that entrepreneurs like you are always thinking one step ahead. So you need banking solutions that can keep up. It begins with lending. Does your business need working capital or financing for new equipment? How about a real estate or a construction loan? Good news, the B1 lending team is ready to learn your goals and help you find the best lending option available. Now let's talk about uncomplicating your daily cash flow. B1 offers a full array of treasury management services that let you collect funds faster, pay funds more efficiently, and access your information with powerful online tools. Most importantly, B1 understands the value of working with local nonprofits to build a stronger community. They believe in giving back through hands-on involvement with their B1 Community Outreach Program because it's simply the right thing to do. B1 Bank. Be uncomplicated. To learn more, visit b1bank.com. Equal housing lender, member FDIC. Hello, I'm Andrew McClendon, your host of the Next Entrepreneur Podcast. We're here today in the Propel Production Podcast Studio in Baton Rouge, and we welcome our guest, Mr. Michael Hogstrom. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you're owner and managing principal of Onsite Design and Development.
Yes,
right?
sir.
So you're an architect, a developer. Do you build?
I do not. I've tried it a couple times.
Yeah.
It was another set of headaches that I wasn't ready for yet.
Well, there's so many. I'm really interested in digging into what all you do, and you've done a lot, so much over the years. In addition to designing beautiful homes and doing some really fascinating real estate development projects, I'm really looking forward to that. But also diving into like the differences between what you do as an architect and what you do as a developer, and we'll get into that. But why don't we start by you telling us what it is generally that Onsite Design and Development does today?
Absolutely. Onsite Design and Development, which as of about a week and a half ago is now Onsite MPH.
MPH.
I've taken on 2 junior partners that have been with me for close to a decade.
Oh, congrats, man.
We're still Onsite DD, Design and Development. The majority of our work is we draw a lot of houses. We draw anywhere from 200 to 400 homes a year, residential spec side up to the high-end custom side and everything in between. We work with usually maybe anywhere from 30 to 50 builders at a time across the region.
Wow.
We're starting to do a lot more outside of the Baton Rouge area, outside of the region now. I feel like our name's gotten in the water a little bit. We also, Onsite also does a fair amount of land planning, project consulting. We call it D for D, development for developers. And so we have developers across the region and state that come to us, hire us to do their projects for them, in addition to doing some of our own projects.
Now, on the D for D, are you doing the design, the layout, the conceptual thing, or are you executing on the development itself?
All of the above.
Wow.
It's really become more or less a sushi menu, if you will, of everything from land acquisition to feasibility studies to master planning, performas, project management, down to the architecture
Oh,
itself.
that's fascinating. So it's really interesting when you look at the custom home design side versus the spec.
Yes.
I mean, some of your custom homes are just really something. I mean, you've got some really big projects that you've designed.
I appreciate you saying that. I've got a really good group of people that work for me. The custom designs themselves they kind of trend at Onsite into what we kind of call the passion side of things. They're generally good cash flow, but they don't always profit as well as some of the other facets of our business. But it's the stuff we love.
Well, it's in the variable there is time, right?
It is. It's a lot more time with the client, a lot more changes typically, but it's our network, it's our marketing. It's really what kind of fuels a lot of word of mouth business for the company. It's where we really connect with people the most, probably. Yeah.
Let's talk about when you start a business, particularly a small business. As a founder, you do everything, right? But today you have a team. You built a team over the years. You've been in business. So what is it that you do today?
Are you asking what Mike does today or what Onsite does?
What does Mike do today?
Oh, Mike is a tornado today. Mike still does it all. Part of the move I mentioned to Onsite MPH is trying to get Mike to do a little bit less. Mike still empties a trash can every once in a while, and Mike's working on anywhere from 30 to 50 homes at a time, and Mike's juggling 2 to 3 developments. Mike's coaching Little League and everything in between, but Mike thrives in the chaos.
Yeah.
So
I get that.
I prefer it that way.
Yeah, I get that. I can look at individuals who seem to have, a singular focus, either in their career or even their hobbies. I can look at that and appreciate it, maybe even find something kind of romantic about that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not who I am. I like putting on different hats, for different companies all throughout the day. And that's my happy place.
I understand that.
So I relate 100% to what you're saying. I did want to tell you that I just recently met you.
Yes.
Right? And we're talking about a deal. I really was able to witness how you kind of do business.
Sure.
And it's really fascinating because, we could have done, our conversation over the phone. Mm-hmm. But you knew to say, come on in the office.
Yes, absolutely.
And I want to get into your office here in a little bit because it's a pretty special place. But going into your office and sitting across the desk from you and seeing, who you are, how casual you can be in conducting your business. But, it oozes of experience, great design style, the capacity to do a lot of things and have a great understanding of what you do, have a master of what you do. It's super effective. And I'm sure that's exactly why you do that. But so much more effective than anyone could be over the phone. So I was really like, Lamar and I came and saw you, and I left there going, man, Mike's got it going on.
I appreciate you saying that. I've been doing what I do as an architect, land planner, probably 23, 24 years now. Yeah. But I've been doing Onsite. This is our 10th year. And it really wasn't until a couple of years ago, one of my employees said, Mike, you're one of the best salespeople I've ever seen. And it didn't feel good to hear that.
Really?
Because I had never thought of myself as a salesperson, especially in the creative field and architects and our black capes. And that culture of design is very, I'm gonna use air quotes here, highbrow, right?
Yeah, right.
Maybe more so like the individuals you were just discussing a moment ago that are very much in a singular discipline.
Yeah.
And there's a romantic beauty to that. But I'm taking a long time to answer your question. But she said, you're a great salesperson. I said, okay. And it didn't hit me right, and I thought about it. And I said, why do you think that is? And the simple answer was you believe everything you say, and you're rigorously honest 99.9% of the time. And so, again, I appreciate your words, but I think it's there's an authentic,
right,
an authenticity.
Exactly.
I'm genuine when I come across, and it's really the passion for what I do that comes out, and it makes it really easy to talk about.
Yeah. So that's what I picked up with. Is I felt like you were a very effective salesperson, but you did not come across as if you were trying to sell. What you sold was what you said, authenticity, but knowledge, intellect, and experience, and an obvious, really, really profound design style. So, I mean, it was just a great package. So I just wanted to comment to you on that, because it was kind of a subtle thing, but very, very effective, which is, clearly, probably one of the reasons for your great success. But, you're a notorious hard worker, right? I mean, I've read about, your 100-hour weeks and designing, from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. I was curious, where that work ethic came from.
It came from my parents, more specifically my father, my mother too. But I get asked this question a fair amount. I think a simple story and answer is, when I look back and think about the beginnings of work and the separation from play as a child, I think I started cutting grass when I was tall enough to reach the mower handle.
Yeah.
But what really sticks out in my mind is whether it was during school or during the summer, I would wake up in the morning and I'd walk into our kitchen in my family home, and there was always an index card on the counter, on the island, on the peninsula, wherever we were living. And it had anywhere from 5 to 10 things for me to do that day.
Wow.
In addition to whatever homework or ball practice or whatever I had going on. And so I think when I look back, my father kept my hands busy with work, and not in an overbearing way, and in a responsible and mature way. And I think when I look back, I think that's where it came from and was probably infused in me at a young age. And then, not to get overwinded on the point, but architecture school is a gauntlet. And so they really prepare you. Most architecture schools prepare you for two things. One is a lot of criticism, and the second is really long hours.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, they talk about that a lot, right? When you grew up, I asked this question, whether you moved around a lot, because, later in your career when you're getting out of college and what have you, it seems as if you did. Did you live in one place, or did y'all move around?
We did move around a lot. I probably lived in 2 to 3 childhood homes.
Where did you grow up?
You can cut me off if I get too long here. I was born in Los Alamos, New Mexico in 1977. My father is I say this in a humble way, my father is a world-renowned medical physicist. And so he was a native of Texas and did a stint in New Mexico, which is where I was born. But we moved back to Houston, Texas when I was probably 2.5, 3 years old. And I grew up in Houston.
I see, okay.
For the majority of my childhood. And we had 2 childhood homes there. And after that, I went away to school in the Midwest. I can fill in a lot of that, but we didn't move around a ton.
You went to college where, Drury?
Went to Drury College.
How did you pick that? That's a small place. How did you pick that?
It was a very small school at the time. I had taken one of these Myers-Briggs exams or something. My parents had me take several tests when trying to figure out what I wanted to do.
And your dad must have just been this amazing influence, right?
Well, it's funny, and we still laugh about it today. I think the Myers-Briggs test said he should be an architect or he should be a bus driver. Those would be where he would be happiest and most effective.
Oh, that's funny.
And there were no programs for bus driving per se at the time. But I was really interested. I played varsity sports, played varsity basketball and golf in high school, and basketball was part of my life from a very young age. And that was something I had done, 2 or 3 times a day for the majority of my life up until that point, and it was something that was hard to let go. My father and I took a trip. I forfeited spring break my senior year, and we got in a car and went and checked out some colleges across the Midwest. I believe my father wanted me to leave Texas and see some new things, and so...
and I'm sure he thought that was a better use of your time than being on spring break.
I'm sure of it. Sure of it, along with his index card. But and anyway, we found a small school in Springfield, Missouri that was had an accredited architecture program. There were only 4 or 5 accredited architecture programs that were also liberal arts based at that point in time. And there was an opportunity for me to walk on the basketball team there. And
no kidding.
And I played for a very brief amount of time.
Yeah.
I still tell people today that my my high school basketball team would have rivaled the college the college team I aspired to play on. But I very quickly got serious about my studies and let intramurals suffice and kind of scratch that itch for me.
So when did you first realize that you wanted to be an architect?
I don't know the answer to that question. Part of me wants to say yesterday, and part of me wants to say 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know if I still even see myself that way, as much as I think of myself as a creative person and a designer. My mother has a picture that she shows people of me when I was about 2, just old enough and tall enough to stand up, and it's a picture of me standing at a coffee table, and this coffee table is maybe 2 feet by 6 feet. This was in our house in New Mexico. I would take all of the Matchbox cars, and perhaps you remember the large yellow Fisher-Price buses, and but I would take all of the cars and I would arrange them within the footprint of this coffee table to where it filled up completely and there was no negative space. So maybe when I was 2, I don't know. I was thinking about things and how they fit spatially at a very young age.
Yeah, that's interesting. At post-college,
Yes, sir.
you got I'm guessing most of this that I've read about, some of your worldly travels where you were either working or studying or researching. I'm guessing most of that was post-college, but why don't you fill me in on that, because you covered some ground there, and I was just curious as you visited and spent some time in London or Paris or Edinburgh or Cambridge, other places you've been, what were those experiences like? Some of them obviously pretty brief, and then what did you feel like looking back on those travels, what you gained out of that?
It's a good question. The majority of, if we kind of lump all those travels and sojourns together, it was really over the last year or so of college. I did my senior thesis comparing the cities of London and Paris. And at the time I had, let's say, 3 professors that, and if you recall, I'm a suburban Houston kid in the Midwest. And I had great friends and peers and classmates in college, but I really developed several relationships with some professors that were from Greece and New York and other places to me that I'd never been before. And I could tell they took somewhat of a personal interest in me and our relationship and encouraged me. When I look back, I can see it now as an adult. They were probably the ones that planted some of those seeds. Hey, Mike, you should go check out Boston. You should go check out New York.
So they saw you as
you would love this stuff. Like, you don't go rushing back to whatever suburb you crawled out of, if that makes sense.
So they saw some potential in you.
I'm sure. I don't know if, sure, they saw potential, but I think I like to connect with people and take my connections and personal and professional relationships very seriously, and I think they were probably giving me back what I was putting into it. Yeah.
You think they saw you as a hard worker back then?
Some of the time, maybe. I as always, was burning the candle at multiple ends between sports and fraternity and student government and whatever other, even after school, whatever AIA, American Institute of Architects, whatever I was volunteering for. I think they saw some of that, but
you were pretty engaged.
I was, but this is not my motto, if you will, as much anymore. But back then it was work hard and play hard, and so they might say I'm a hard worker half. They might have said I was a hard worker half of the time, but I had a lot of fun too.
Hannis T. Bourgois provides accounting services, litigation support, as well as tax and assurance services to companies and individuals throughout the region. With offices in Baton Rouge, Denham Springs, New Orleans, and Hammond, their team of professionals have a wide range of specialized expertise and give personalized attention to each client they work with. HTB serves all types of business structures, including corporations, private businesses, startups, individuals, and more. So call them today to learn how they can help you. Reach out to them by phone or learn more at their website, www.htbcpa.com. A little testimonial here. HTB has been my accounting firm for over 30 years and have guided my initial company from startup to expanding to numerous operating companies. HTB has provided guidance in helping us expand across the U.S., doing business in more than 30 states. Flat out, HTB has made all the difference in the world to our business. This podcast is sponsored by NAI Latter & Blum, Louisiana's leading commercial real estate firm, offering expertise in every discipline, including office, industrial, retail, multifamily, and corporate services. Their agents guide you through the real estate process from start to finish, using a host of marketing, prospecting, and analytical technologies. As leading entrepreneurs, your valuable time and resources should align with the most trusted name in commercial real estate, NAI Latter & Blum. Learn how they can work for you at www.ladderblum.com. Let's continue on with the journey, Michael. You're out of college, and you spend, 10 or 12 years from that point forward learning your trade, learning your craft, working at different places. Where did you start out?
I started out in Memphis, Tennessee.
Yeah.
Quick story, if we've got a little bit of time. I graduated. I had 3 degrees in college. I had a Bachelor of Architecture, a Bachelor of Arts in History, and Bachelor of Arts in English and Literature, and did some minors in studio art, creative writing. Anyway, I had it set up to where I was going to stay in Springfield, Missouri, which is where I went to college,
right,
and stay for a couple of years and get a master's in English and Literature.
Now, because of a passion of yours, I didn't really ask you what your mom did.
My mother went to LSU originally. Okay. She was I guess it's a biologist, microbiologist, and did that for a little while. Of course,
a medical physicist is going to marry a microbiologist.
And she, they met at a hospital in Houston. She soon stayed at home with my sister and I. And then my mother went back to school. Oh gosh, probably in the early 90s. She went up to SMU in Dallas, Texas, and got a master's of theology. And my mother's a Methodist minister, Presbyterian minister, chaplain, and has worked at several hospitals here in Baton Rouge as well. So my mother really had 3 careers.
Yeah, that is fascinating. So, I mean, that explains a lot about, when you talk about your college career and your degrees and desire to, continue on with the master's. But so what did you do? You ended up in Memphis?
Ended up in Memphis. So that summer I was going to stay at school. Right out of school, my best friend and I jumped in a car, and we drove the country for 2 months. This is my childhood best friend back from Texas. We didn't have much money, but whatever we had left from school, we said, let's go do this. And
you had a degree?
I had 3 degrees.
And a full tank of gas.
And a full tank of gas. And I had 2 jobs waiting for me as a grad assistant and at an architecture firm back in Springfield when I got done with this summer trip. And we went, and we had 3 goals. We visited baseball stadiums.
Oh,
golf courses, and roller coasters. And We did that till we ran out of money, and I went back to Missouri. The job I had fallen through with the architecture firm, and Springfield, Missouri at the time was not a large market, and so I, at that point, had to pull it together. But at the time, I was out of school with the degrees, but I was very, very interested in going to film school at that point in my career.
Really?
Probably against my father's wishes at that point.
I'm thinking that's probably true.
So I said, hey, I'm still thinking about film school. And he said, well, why don't you go work as an architect, as an intern architect for several years, and that'll be there. You can come back to it in time if you'd like to. Yeah. So I started in Memphis. Quickly, I guess within 2 years, I moved to Princeton, New Jersey, and worked for a firm there for 2 years. Went back to Houston to chase a high school sweetheart for 3 or 4 years. Yeah, and worked for 2 or 3 firms there. Went back to Memphis, the firm I had worked for originally out of school. Had always kept in touch with me and welcomed me back, and that was all kind of right in time for really what was the second quasi-recession that I had seen in my career, first being September 11th. This was in 2009 when I went back to Memphis, and we saw the Goldman Sachs collapse, and for architects at the time, we were super frontline. As the credit lines, I feel like you and I have talked about this maybe once before, Andrew, as the credit lines shut down from big banks in Los Angeles and New York and kind of worked their way to the middle of our country. At the time, the firm I was with, I watched a firm of 300 or 400, really whittled down to 30 or 40 people in just a couple short months. And that brought me to Baton Rouge in 2009, 2010.
I was flying yesterday, and I was talking with a guy. He said that it's his first time flying since COVID, 2.5 years in. And
sure.
I told him, I took like 8 weeks off, and then have been flying ever since. But it brought me back to 9/11, and I flew 4 days after 9/11 to somewhere in Middle America for a pre-bid conference. And I was the only one on a big plane. Like, they did not cancel the flight somehow.
Sounds like a Twilight Zone episode.
Oh, it was insane. And I walked through airports. There was, a few employees, but no passengers. And I came back to my office, and I told them, we need to buckle up. It's getting ready to get really, really rough.
That's right.
The country had shut down.
Yes.
And so, as is the case with so many of the entrepreneurs we talk to, recessions, whether it's 9/11 or 2008 or whenever, is just an important part of their journey. But that, as you're saying, that is what led you to Baton Rouge?
It's, yes, one of a couple things. My folks had relocated here.
Okay.
My father brought my mother home, if you will, as the nest was somewhat empty. Anyway, so Baton Rouge had become home for me while I was out in my travels in my early career. And so, I came here in 2009, 2010 without the intent of staying. I have a younger sister, has always needed a little help.
Right.
She was, at the time, pregnant with my now nephew. And so between what felt like kind of end of the first quarter, using a basketball analogy, on my career, it kind of felt like a good time to take a break. I had done decent financially. I hadn't done great, but I thought, well, maybe it's a good time to come home.
Right.
And so I came home to be around my family and witness the birth of my nephew. Yeah. And very, very long story short, did not plan on staying. Met a Baton Rouge girl, the only girl I've ever met that I looked at her and I said, I'm going to marry this girl. And I guess as they say, the rest is history.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you ended up, what year did you open Onsite?
I developed the LLC for Onsite in 2006. I needed. I always did work on the side, drawing people's homes and helping out friends and family. So when you look it up, the tax ID has been there much longer. But we opened our doors legitimately for business in 2013, January of 2013 in Baton Rouge.
So during that time, from when you moved here to then, it's a rough time. It's a tough time, right? In the economy, in our industry. In everything, but certainly in our industry as well.
It was.
So you're stitching together those years and doing what you can with designing and what
doing what I can, yeah.
So what was it that in 2013 that made you say, all right, now's the time? You saw enough signs that there was potential work out there?
I didn't. This is a very good story, and I'll try and be quick with it. There's a large architecture firm in Houston, and they're really a worldwide firm. And I had interviewed with them several times over the years. My new girlfriend and I here in Baton Rouge at the time, I said, well, I got people in Houston, maybe let's spread our wings. And she had gone to school in Fort Worth, so she loved Texas as much as I do. Anyway, I went and interviewed at this large firm in Houston for the third or fourth time over the years, and I'd always interview, they'd make me an offer, I'd turn it down, I'd do something else. And so I went and I drove for this interview, and I'm probably embellishing a little bit, but it's how I like to remember it. Went to this interview, and they said, Michael, it's so nice to see you again. We're not going to offer you a job today. We just really wanted to see you and see how you were and talk with you a little bit. And they looked at me and they said, Michael, if you could do anything in the world right now, what would you do? And I said, well, I would probably be a road manager for the band Radiohead. That's what I would do, because I would love to go listen to music every day and travel the world. And they said, no, for real. Cut the act, Mike. What would you do? And I said, I would design and develop my own projects. And they said, why? And I said, so I could be in control and limit the mistakes of others. And when I look back, it was a very pure answer.
Right.
It was a very young answer. It was a very arrogant answer. Yeah. But they looked at me and they said, why don't you go and do that? And so I don't think I drove back to Baton Rouge, with this literal thought in my mind that I'm going to do this, but it was kind of when things started to happen organically.
Yeah.
So,
my recollection of that from, you were going from being an architect to, we're getting ready to get into that development journey, and I was kind of on the other perspective of being a contractor and ultimately getting into development. And for the same reasons, it felt like you could create a little more control. And there probably was a tendency to say, okay, well, it must be the developers that are making the money, right? And then you get into development and you go, well, it must be the land guys that are making the, so you kind of keep chasing this.
That's ball. Right.
But there's so much different between architecture and development. You don't see that combo terribly often. And I think there's, and I try to think of it as there's this creative side on the design side. But development is just hardcore finance, right?
It is.
And does the deal work or does the deal not work? And a lot of times those two mindsets don't necessarily go together well, but until they do, right?
That's right.
What was your experience in starting into that development phase?
It's a great question. I was working at an engineering firm. So didn't take the job in Houston. I'm here in Baton Rouge.
You didn't take it because they didn't offer it to you.
That's right. That's fair. That's very fair. And so my wife and I were recently married, and I was driving past, and I was doing some disaster recovery housing for this engineering firm. So I was still doing architecture, but it was kind of still felt like a little bit of time off for me from the larger architecture firms and bigger projects I'd worked on. in that first 12 to 14 years or so. I was driving to work here in Baton Rouge. We lived in Mid-City. We rented a little house on Glenmore, and I would drive over to Florida Boulevard to work every day, and I was passing an empty piece of land, at the corner of Croydon and Government, and I think that day after day I was looking at that piece of land and thinking about the money I had made for developers, right, and my career as an architect, and I thought I'll try it for myself. And I remember calling my wife, who was a school teacher at the time, and I kind of got her in between classes, and I said, "Hey, I'm quitting today. I'm walking out of this engineering firm." And she said, "You're doing what?" And I said, "Well, you know who you married. I'm a little crazy, but I feel the calling to do this, and we're gonna turn over our couches and seat cushions and scrape together as much as we can, and I want to do a little project here." And so I left the world of architecture. I had the intent of leaving the world of architecture to develop and make the big bucks, right? Quickly to realize my phone started ringing here. So I jumped into this development boat, trying to leave proper nouns out of this today, but several builders and developers here in town, attorneys, all of them, Andrew, started calling me. They said, "Who are you, and what the heck are you doing in our town? You're an architect, right? Well, do you still do that?" And as this little project on Government Street gained some momentum, I quickly put my architect hat right back on and started pursuing both. And really, kind of back to the beginning of this conversation today, I didn't quite say it this way. I've been working 2 jobs for the last 10 years.
So it was a residential development.
It was a residential development, yes, sir.
And so you designed the development, but you also are doing the vertical design as well, right?
I am, and thought that was a good idea.
How was that received once you started going?
I think it was received well, depending on the audience, I guess. I know this at the time. There was a large initiative here in Baton Rouge that was called the Horizon Plan,
right,
and Future BR, and what I was doing worked and dovetailed very well with some of those initiatives, as many municipalities were doing and rewriting their ordinances across the country at that point in time. And so we became, I feel like our little project at the time, it was on 1.3 acres, became kind of a poster child for future development and smart growth. And we haven't talked about this, but some of the firms I worked at and with, cutting my teeth, so to speak, coming up, were all deeply rooted in new urbanist principles, which to people listening right now, they're Googling new urbanism, like, what is that? In short, it's, getting back to maybe some of the great places and towns and planning concepts that the United States was founded on 200 years ago, and right, front porch living and small town feel and things of that nature, anyway.
And pulling that off in infill developments, right? Which is, what was the name of your first development there you're talking about?
Etage Gardens.
Etage. And so 1.3 acres, pretty small.
Pretty small.
Tract of land, but bringing that together. And so how was that for you financially? Was that a positive, a negative?
When I look at the books and look back, the project did not make money for me.
Well, it's hard to, number one, on your first development, but on a small development, it's just very, very difficult.
Absolutely.
But it creates awareness, and it creates a brand, right? And what you're talking about, the introduction maybe of this design thought, this new urbanism, right?
That's it. It did. It created some awareness. It threw off, I've never quite said it this way, it's how it's going to come out. It threw off so much brand of who Mike was.
Yeah.
And the name Onsite was just something, that it was the label I had. I didn't think a ton about it at the time. I'd come up with it in 2006, but it was really the first. It was an introduction to Baton Rouge and to the region and to several of the players that you and I cross paths with every day, and to who I was and how I worked. But it threw off so much work for me and got me in front of a lot of people. And it was, when I look back, I tell people in settings like this, at that time, I'm just starting to see some of it clearly now, but I really, in that moment, this was 2012, 2013, I caught a tiger by the tail and really just looked up a couple years ago and kind of let go, and I'm able to look back and starting to make sense of some of it.
Yeah, I think part of it is the design style, right? Your style, I say is very unique, and it's very, very appealing. And you created some beautiful homes. I mean, if you folks go check out Onsite Design Development's website and just scroll through as the images scroll through of the homes, exteriors and interior shots, just stunningly beautiful. I mean, not a shortage of images there, right?
There's not.
So, I mean, you got a lot going on there. So you're feeding that, you're talking about, grabbing the tiger by the tail, the response that you got to that first project, then it appears to have fed both sides of your business. You talk about having two jobs, right? The design and the development. So you continued on that and continued down that development path, which is, maybe a little brave because that's a tough business. Because for those that don't quite understand it, you're putting out a lot of money, right? You're buying land, and then you're doing a lot of stuff that's buried underground, right? The infrastructure that people don't see, and you're putting in roads and lights. But if something happens in the market, in the economy, that interest clock does not stop, right? You're borrowing from the bank, and you keep borrowing money. So it's a tough gig.
It's a very tough gig, and it's getting tougher and tougher, especially with current affairs. But I never, at that time, and I didn't know this rule of thumb and had not learned this lesson, but I think as aggressive as I was prudent enough to not ever do a project at that time that could take you out. And so that's kind of, I don't know, when I speak with my peers and other developers here in my community and others, that's, Michael, don't ever do a project that can take you out.
Yeah.
And ultimately I ended up doing one, and I fought my way through it.
Yeah.
But it is risky, and nobody sees that bottom line that you see day after day. But the design side and the development side and the multiple profit centers within both of those sides, were able to, they almost became buttresses for each other. They were able to prop each other up at times. There were times when the development needed to carry the design, and vice versa. As we were building, what John in my office, who we've been together a while now, John's always referred to us as a hydra, as a unicorn. As we were kind of building this hydra, that each facet kind of helped to hold the other one up at times, not really knowing where we were going, but we knew that we were ascending. And I always think of, I use this analogy, I don't know if you're familiar with Howard Hughes, the aviator, and I'll probably get some of the details incorrect here, but Howard Hughes built what I think was called the Spruce Goose, it was a wingspan that was, half a mile wide, and he needed an entire desert to get this thing up in the air. And,
the plane was made of wood, the Spruce Goose, right?
Long story short, it took us a long time to get it up in the air, and I don't understand aeronautics and aerodynamics, but I know that once you get something in the air, it's hard. It's going to take a long time for it to come back down. And so that's kind of how I feel like when I think about all of the design side and the development side and all of the things we were doing to let those two pieces of the hydra kind of feed each other and support each other. That's what comes to mind.
Yeah, so fascinating. There's a couple of other infill projects that happened. I'm not sure the exact timeline, but again, beautiful homes, really interesting concepts. I'm thinking of Overton Walk.
Yes.
And
Township.
At
Old Goodwood.
Very cool. But I want to take a quick break here, get a word from our sponsor. When I come back, I want to talk about Adelia.
Okay.
At Old Goodwood. I think it's fascinating project. Pivotal is pleased to sponsor the Next Entrepreneur podcast. Pivotal is a commercial building contractor that performs new building construction, building maintenance, tenant improvements, renovations, and additions. Pivotal has been in business for over 25 years. The Pivotal team is simply the best. They have an impeccable safety record and they crush schedules. A focus on quality and professional communication is at the root of their success. Pivotal also performs programs for clients who build in multiple markets with current projects in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. If you are looking for the perfect addition to your project team, a contractor who can deliver the results you need to succeed, Pivotal is the one. When it's critical, call Pivotal. They can be found online at pivotalperforms.com. Mike, not to make light of those two developments I just mentioned, Overton Walk and Township, again, very beautiful, but really wanted to get into Adelia here at Old Goodwood because that is one of the most fascinating projects you could imagine. So at the heart of this, 17 acres, I believe?
Just under 17 acres, yes, sir.
Was the Goodwood Plantation home, which dates back forever. Tell us how you got to that property and how in the world you were able to move forward with that.
Gosh, it's been 7 years now, 7 years. I'll tell you what I do know, maybe about what happened before it came to me. I know I was not at the top of the list when the sellers were looking for buyers.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I would imagine I was close to last on that list. But at the time, it was a big piece of land in the middle of town. And other than the property adjacent to town center, it was probably one of the largest contiguous tracts in the middle of town. And so I knew at the time, I was a tornado at that point and building the business. And as you mentioned, it was a Taj and Overton and Township and
hundreds of houses.
And when I look back, I was already over my skis when that project came to me.
Yep.
I knew at the time from peers around me that it was a young man's project. Young man, that's relative now. I'm 45. Most people still tell me I'm a young man.
You are indeed.
But that time, I was in my late 30s, and it just felt like the next big bite that I needed to take at the time. I don't know that I understood what I was getting into. Probably 5 years too soon for me, emotionally, financially, mentally, from an experience standpoint, experientially. I don't know if that's a word, but it was too soon for me, and I hadn't quite adopted that don't do a project that could take you out mentality. But some of that work ethic and tenacity, and I think at the time, I'm glad to have this platform today to even discuss this. I think the romanticism of the scale of the project was very enticing to me. I'm not one of these guys that necessarily gets fuel from somebody telling me I can't do something. That's not necessarily what motivates me, but I do like what I call the next blank piece of paper.
And then there's the challenge, right? I mean, did I remember this correctly, that there's a deed restriction which said that the home had to stay.
There was not.
There was not?
And that's what was, I guess, fascinating and ironical. And the house was not on any historical register. When we put that project together, did the design, was starting to put the financing together. When we took it to the city for approval, we showed two schemes. We showed one that removed the home in the center of the site, and geometrically we were able to pick up another 10 lots or something. And it would have been the type of project that I could have retired on, wink, wink. Not really, right. But it would have been much more profitable.
Right.
But on brand at the time for us and who I am and my travels and my love for historic architecture is like, this is a beautiful building and it needs to be preserved. If I could even go further, it wasn't until maybe a month in that I really started to feel kind of what could possibly be some of the racial overtones to a project like that. Mm-hmm. And so I vetted that project with some of my peers, both white and African American, and got the green light. And they said it's okay. Yeah. And I said, I'm more interested in the historical architecture piece and making a place around it at the time. But that was kind of how it all came together. And the closing of that project, I feel sounds like you may have been familiar with it at the time. It probably took us a good 6 or 7 months, and there were 11th hour hiccups, and it was a bumpy landing, but we managed to put it together. And
but I wouldn't underestimate the challenge of, what do you have, 48 lots there?
We started with originally 48, yes.
And to put that on that tract of land adjacent to a 165-year-old building and have it work. And I had my doubts early on, but when I see today, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
It's very, very well done. And the fact that you were able to save that and save those beautiful, beautiful live oaks, it's just, it's really taking. And you're, fast forward now, your office is there on the second floor, right?
It is. To segue there, we had some great investors in that project that did well, and we had some great banks along the way that helped us through, and they did well. I ended up with 2 acres in the center and a 165-year-old home sitting in the middle of it, and then that was the question: is what to do with that home. Over the course of the 4 or 5 years that it took to get to that financial clearing, if you will, the world was changing again. Baton Rouge is changing again, and so we thought long and hard about the best way to activate that space, the land and the house, and came up with the name the Gilmore, and said, hey, this would be a beautiful place for people to gather. It could be a nice event center, and what better place, to have an architecture office than the office itself surrounded by 40 homes that we designed.
Yeah.
And so instead of having to always rely on a portfolio or social media, why don't you come and see us? And this is what we do. So it was kind of like having a lab in our front yard, in our backyard, and a living, breathing portfolio. And I think just to go a little bit longer, the name of the Gilmore, we said, even from the beginning, but really more so over the past few years, is what can we do with to preserve this beautiful piece of architecture, but how can we rebrand it so it can be something else over the next 150 years and maybe not be what it was for the previous 150 years. And we struggled with the name for a long time, and it's a quick story, and I'll kick it back to you. I know I'm getting long-winded. We talked internally. We had groups. We had marketing groups. Like, what do we call this thing? And name after name after name. No. And so I'm laying in bed one night about 1.5 years ago, and listening to some music. And there's a guitarist, and his name is David Gilmore.
Right.
And he was
he's a guitarist
for Pink Floyd. And
okay, yeah.
and anyway, I was just listening to some music, and I just thought, man, what a great guy, what great music. And I just kind of, end of the day, laying in bed, just and I was like, what a great dude, what a great name, man. David Gilmore had some strength and was. Anyway, and that's it. And then I came back in the next day. I said, we're going to call it the Gilmore. And everyone was like, fantastic. Man, that's cool. And very few people know until now that's where the name came from.
So, when you think about those infill developments that you've done,
there's
a NIMBY element to those, right? I mean, it's one thing to go develop on a tract of land somewhere in suburbia, but you try to bring an infill development. You've got the not in my backyard crew. It takes a talent, takes a gift to navigate through that. What's been your key to success with that?
It does. This may be the only two maybe proper nouns that I mentioned today. There are a lot of people, I would never begin to make a list and leave people out, but navigating that NIMBYism, if you will, right. I've had two really great friends, mentors, and they just both happen to be real estate attorneys. And one is Charles Landry, and the second is Eric Piazza. And those are two guys that talk about those late night calls and those early morning coffees. And those guys have shared with me a lot of their experience, a lot of their grace, a lot of their bedside manner, and in a lot of ways have both been a great mirror for me. Mm-hmm. I think we talked a lot about maybe some of the chaos today. It's really hard to see what you look like in the middle of that tornado, and those two guys, in addition to many, many others, but those two guys really helped me get through a lot of that. I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but those guys come to mind when I think about the success there.
Yeah. Well, it takes a lot of pacifying. I mean, at the end of the day, as a developer, you just have to follow the development code, which some neighbors, that may not be enough for them. But if you follow the letter of the law, then, generally speaking, but you'd be okay. But if there's enough protest, which there can be dozens or hundreds of people lined up, and they'll let's table this, that type thing. But it does take. I mean, you really have to pour your heart out to these neighbors and show them, what it is that you want to do. But when it's different, when the density's different, and the product's different. But look, at the end of the day, if you look at the property values surrounding some of your developments, it has only helped the neighbors, in a really meaningful way.
Sure.
Which is now they probably like you.
Some of them. I appreciate you saying that, though. Yeah. You're right.
All right, let's start to wrap up, Mike, and
sure.
I want to talk about growth and expansion. You started off talking about taking on a couple of partners.
Yes.
And give us an idea moving forward what does it look like for on-site design development moving forward? And, let's talk about, what it may look like 5 or 10 years down the road if you've developed those thoughts.
Absolutely. Everything we've done at Onsite from the very beginning, growth-wise, or we like to say, it has happened very organically. I mentioned to you some of my schooling and my background earlier. I'm not an MBA. I'm not a finance strategist. As a matter of fact, the only thing Onsite has really ever written down as far as mission goes is do the next right thing.
Yeah.
And that has really been a guiding principle for all of us along the way. And so, as we are backing into a decade, John Porcio and Sean Mitchell, they've both been with me from close to the beginning. and they've seen the highs and seen the lows, and those guys have put in their time. And so when I start to look ahead at what the next right things are for Onsite to do, I know that, and I'll say this behind some of your kind words earlier, we have gotten very, very good at the custom, at the high-end residential.
Man, it is so good.
And I couldn't be more excited. Some of the stuff we've done in the last 2 or 3 years, which is being built right now, the next wave of images is it's next level stuff, and we're excited about it. And so we will continue in that vein and start to reach out to larger metro markets and Atlanta and Birmingham and Houston, Dallas, Memphis, Little Rock, Jackson. Baton Rouge is what I call kind of a great, like, half spoke city. If you kind of draw a radius from us within 300 miles or so, there's some really great metro areas. So we'll continue in that vein. We continue to take on new builders. Our group of builders, if you will, is constantly growing, and those are probably some of our favorite relationships. And so we'll continue to do the spec stuff as well. I think you'll see us probably do a little bit less of the developments that we initiate, as I know Sean and John have more of an interest in the architecture. Yeah. We all love both, but there's more of an interest there, and those guys are pure architects at heart.
Yeah.
Less the
you got partners now.
Yeah, it is a little less of the tornadic entrepreneur that Mike is. And then I can really see, and I'm going to answer your question, at the moment over the next couple of years, my phone is really starting to ring right now with more of the D4D work. Yeah. Developers looking to start projects, and we're on the brink of what will be some kind of recession, and cyclically, and when you look, it's time for a little bit of a reset in our industry, and I can tell it by the way the phone's ringing and the calls that we're getting right now. For me, in taking on these partners and starting to shift some of the responsibilities, the interest there for me is twofold. One, my children are 8, 5, and almost 3, and so
whole house.
The next 10 years for me, I'd like to be at home a little bit more and be present for that. I've had enough mentors. By the way, I don't listen to too many people, right? But I have heard this, and I heard it clear: is Mike, don't miss your kids, because it'll be over, and I missed it, and don't do that. And so I'm hyper focused on that, but I think
that's not an easy thing for an entrepreneur.
It's not.
I mean, it's no excuse, but it's.
So you'll see some of that. I don't believe in quarter life or midlife crisis stuff, but I know some of it's real. But to answer your question, I don't totally know professionally right now.
Yeah.
I think I'm just starting to look out and realize that I still have a lot to offer. Yeah. And what I do in the next 10 years will be very impactful for my business and my family. I know that sounds like a generic response, but I've got some of the gray hair now, and I certainly have some of the scars and the experience that I'm still trying to figure out. Do I need to be in a consulting role? Do I need to be more in the office mentoring? I've thought about building. I'm thinking about a lot of things right now, but I think we'll see where things go over the next year or two, and continue, to get the next spruce goose, to get Onsite MPH, to get it off the ground, and let these guys take some of the reins.
So we have a new descriptor for entrepreneurs: tornadic entrepreneur. So we're going to add that to our list. But another important thing in your journey, Mike, you talked about this in between the breaks, is sobriety.
Yes.
And I certainly don't want to try to narrow the importance of that down to just a few minutes, but I did want to give you an opportunity for us to chat about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm in recovery, and I have been sober, I guess, just over almost 11 years.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. But as we say, just one day. I've been sober for one day. It's been a big part of my life at 45. And when I met my wife, Lacey, and when I moved to Baton Rouge, won't dive into spirituality or religion, but I think there was a invisible hand of sorts that brought me here to.
I think they're closely tied together.
Yes, and that brought me here to meet her and to be close to my family and to start Onsite. And I got married, got sober, and started Onsite all really within about a year and a half of one another.
Fantastic.
And it's become a huge part of my life and my spirituality. Part of that for me in living that life day to day through my business and my personal affairs is in the efforts of doing the next right thing, but helping others. That's something that we are big on at Onsite. We're big on at the Hogstrom household. I look at my boys every morning as they leave, and they repeat after me. I do my best. I do my best. I help others. I help others, and I'll be kind. And I'll be kind.
That's sweet.
That's
So that is your index card.
That's my index card, man.
For your children.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, your father would have been very analog, right?
Yeah.
And having written it down.
Yes.
But you're the more modern version of father today, and it's direct contact and saying it. So it's very cool.
It's cool, man.
I think there's this other side that we touched on through sobriety is how it can be I think you use the term, jet engine or rocket fuel for life. But that being the entrepreneurial podcast that we are, for business. And I know I stopped drinking 18 years ago, and I experienced that very clearly, right? I was starting a commute in between Austin and Baton Rouge, just like a ping pong ball. I'm just bouncing back and forth constantly. Mm-hmm. And it's not a lifestyle conductive to drinking, right? And so it was really an exciting time in my life, and to be doing this, living in two capitals,
Yeah.
the compartmentalizing of working, and when I'm here, I can work, as long as I need to, and when I'm with my family, it's with my family. So, but I could tell you at work, it was a productive, boost that was very palpable.
It's in recovery, we say that, not all of us, but, addiction, alcoholism, it's the best disease you can get, right? We kind of joke and laugh, and the subversive side of some of those rooms. And but I guess where I'm going with that is those of us that have done the work or made the change in life, you in some ways can have the ability to get a second act. And so for me, it's not quite that black and white when I say, there's a first act and a second act, but there was certainly my life before I got sober.
Yeah.
And absolutely my life after March 3rd, 2011. And in recovery, we refer to them, and it's great. This is super applicable to business and entrepreneurialism. Don't know that that's a word either, but they're called the promises. And if you do these things and make these changes in your life one day at a time, these amazing things can happen. And that invisible hand, that's the word I'm using for today, but God can show himself to you in your personal and professional affairs. And when I look back now, which you're not supposed to do a ton of recovery, a lot of the promises that have come to me through hard work, through good parents. We haven't talked a lot about friends today, and that's okay. I have very good friends throughout the country. But doing that work and making that change has brought a lot of the promises to me, to my family, and to my business. So
good stuff, Mike. I know we could talk for a lot longer.
We could.
I really appreciate it. Look, you're a good man.
Thanks, man.
You are doing great work, very creative, highly intelligent, tornadically entrepreneurial. And it has been a great pleasure to talk with you. So I appreciate you coming in, sir.
I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you, Andrew.
I really enjoyed that conversation. I love talking with entrepreneurs when they bring up issues that are raw and real and meaningful to their life and the growth of their business. It's happened several times in our podcasts, and I really appreciate that authenticity. Mike talked about how once he got sober, his business really began to zoom. He's taken on new partners here very recently and has plans for, regional growth. And so we wish him the best with that. I love his brand, which is great design. I love what he did with his infill developments and the new urbanism movement. He does great work. He's a great guy. We appreciate Mike coming in. We appreciate you guys watching, and we'll catch you next time. We would like to thank our title sponsor, B1 Bank. They can be found online at b1bank.com. The Next Entrepreneur is produced by Propel Productions. You can find more information at propelyourstory.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the Next Entrepreneur podcast and hit the bell for notifications. You can also follow us on social media. The links are in the description below.